Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
A very good evening. Sunday the 12th of February 2023. For those of you who are new to this, my name is MIAH MBE and I've been running these Recusant 9 transmissions in some format. First by writing, I do write mainly, and then by video and podcast and whatnot for the best part of 5 years now. Really interesting week. We finally saw GB News Charlie show the grooming gang report. I found it particularly interesting in many ways. I didn't watch it last night. I know a few of you got in touch with me last night. I didn't watch it last night. I had other things to do, but I did watch it this morning, and I've read a lot of the analysis and I've had time to reflect. There's a specific clip I want to play for you to start off with. I'm going to play that and I'm going to work my way through some of the issues that emerged from it. So here we go.
We've heard about how the police and councils failed victims. But what did the government do? In 2018, Home Secretary Sajid Javid announced the Home Office review into grooming gangs. It was a big moment. A British Muslim minister was brave enough to look at whether Pakistani men really were overrepresented as abusers. But in the aftermath of the Windrush scandal, the department was hypersensitive about race and did its best to block the report's publication. It took 130,000 signing a petition for it to be released.
But the report was a whitewash. It limply concluded that data collection on ethnicity was so poor that it was impossible to know the truth.
Rather than improve data collection, it said that the majority of abusers were white. However, the report it based that on found that 30% of abusers were white and 28% were Asian, despite whites making up 85% of the population and Asians just 8%. Clearly, Asians were vastly overrepresented in this kind of child abuse, being over 3 times more likely to be an abuser. But the report didn't mention it. However, it did find space to say that racial bias could be to blame for the prominence of Pakistanis in the national conversation about grooming gangs. More recently, a National Crime Agency report cited a study which found that Pakistanis dominate national grooming gang statistics. By comparing the number of prosecutions to the overall population, it showed that 1 in every 2,200 Muslim men over 16 in England and Wales had been prosecuted for this crime from 1997 to 2017. When it came to Pakistanis, it was 1 in 1,700. In Rochdale, 1 in 280 Muslim males over 16 were prosecuted. In Telford, it was 1 in 126. In Rotherham, 1 in 73. The report pointed out that many abusers take no responsibility for their crimes and plead not guilty.
They take no responsibility because they can get away with it. When they return from their limited punishments, the community often does not ostracize them. And as these damning figures show, with such high rates of prosecution, their crimes can't have been a secret.
Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is how the statistics are now finally out. Actually, two things I want to talk about. The first thing is the Conservative government were complicit in the cover-up. That's not me, that's GB News. In the report that they made reference to, over 136,000 people had to sign a petition They released a report, they skewered the data. I've shared this with you now for the last 2 years. Anyone who doubted what I was sharing with you now can see it is factually correct, and also factually correct of the disproportionate ethnic focus towards Pakistani men. The figures in Telford and the figures in Rochdale are... Well, there's a correlation, isn't there? I think that's what he's suggesting. One is that there is a correlation. And two, where I have been repeatedly called a racist, death threats, Pakistani men, communities, Pakistani politicians trying to have me imprisoned, it's now a matter of fact, as demonstrated here, of the Pakistani bias towards these crimes. Now, in the world I come from, in the analytical world that I come from, in the data-driven and the statistic-focused world I previously occupied, what would then have happened and should have happened is you would look at the cultural, racial, community characteristics to determine what was going on there and what the intervention could and should have been. When I've been advocating for that, the MP for Oldham Western Royton, Jim Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon, used parliamentary privilege, flanked by Debbie Abrams, the MP for Oldham East and Saddleworth, to name me a far-right racist. These are, as I've repeatedly maintained, predominantly Pakistani, occasionally Bangladeshi, almost exclusively Muslim. The second element now I would like to continue on to, so just bear with me.
This lack of responsibility and community punishment has been linked to clannish attitudes among British Pakistanis. To learn more, I sat down with Wazik, a British Pakistani Muslim researcher.
I think there is a culture within some of these British Pakistani communities where the perpetrators feel that white working class girls do not equal the same as those within their own community.
When Ruby was interviewed, in her video interview, she said in evidence that she had been chosen by this man because she was a white girl and these men wanted a white girl to abuse. She also talked of them passing her round in a circle as though she was a ball, with a circle of Pakistani abusers who would go into a flat and they would use that flat for the night. They'd take one white girl into that flat and they would all abuse her.
But many people were desperate to blur the lines. One of the ways they ensured the focus was not put on British Pakistanis was through the use of the umbrella term Asian, which deflected attention away from the sad reality.
I think the term Asian isn't always appropriate. When we do look at, again, the demographic of perpetrators, we are seeing that they're mostly British Pakistanis.
I know that these gangs are often referred to as Asian grooming gangs, but I would always say, well, I have yet to come across any man from Thailand or Japan or China who are involved in these grooming gangs. They are predominantly Pakistani, British, Muslim men. And that is not racist, it is a fact.
If the police, councils, government and the media had confronted the stark truth about the grooming gangs, the abuse of thousands of girls could have been avoided.
Failing to accept these facts has allowed hundreds, if not thousands of abusers to hide behind the veil of political correctness.
We've seen some British
Okay, that's the first bit I start to disagree with, the veil of political correctness. I think what Charlie's done is very brave. I think bringing this back to the national spotlight in the way he has, with the greatest of respect, with the limited knowledge he has, he is telling us what we already know. So what he's told us is that the government were complicit in covering it up. This is not Asian grooming gangs. There is a predominant bias towards men of Pakistani heritage. And what is also highlighted is that these are racially motivated crimes. That's what the bit Maggie Oliver was referencing to. They were looking specifically for white girls and the way in which they looked at white girls and considered white girls those are racially motivated crimes. He then now moves on to political correctness, which I've disagreed with from the outset. But let's hear where it continues, but I just wanted to stop it there.
Pakistanis who have been reluctant to deal with this issue and have been in absolute denial that this issue is taking place. The reason why is because they don't want to bring shame on their own family.
I think the racial dynamics of this particular kind of sexual abuse have meant that it has not been discussed in the way it should have been in the media, because people in positions of authority have always been frightened of being called racist. With this particular kind of crime, it is irrefutable, in my experience from all the cases that I have dealt with, that the vast majority of the abusers in these cases are Pakistani men.
Political correctness doesn't just mean good manners. It has consequences. And one of those consequences was the abandonment of thousands of girls to years of abuse for fear.
Okay, so what he's saying, and what Maggie Oliver is also suggesting, is that it is the fear of being branded racist that prevented these people from investigating the systematic grooming and gang rape of what Charlie refers to in a late interview of tens of thousands of predominantly working class white girls. Tens of thousands. I disagree with his hypotheses. I've maintained from the outset it is not the fear of being branded racist any more than maintaining community relations that prevented the investigation into these horrific crimes. I've maintained from the outset that the motivation has been to protect the bloc Muslim vote and the interdependency of the Labour Party with the bloc Muslim vote. Charlie does, and you heard him there, and those of you who watched the documentary will have also seen that he talks about the clan-like nature of these communities and keeping things in-house and secret. He also clearly makes reference to key strategic positions in the council being held by members of the community who then went on to become politicians as well. So, it is very easy. In fact, it's a cop-out. It's a cop-out to blame political correctness as to why these crimes were ignored. Why do you think Jim McMahon stood up in Parliament after the grooming gang inquiry into Oldham confirmed that an unspecified number of children were groomed and gang raped and passed around in our town with the authorities' full knowledge, with the police's full knowledge, and called us far-right racists? Why did he do that? Was that political correctness? No. This isn't about political correctness, and political correctness takes us to a dead end. It takes us to a dead end, and it's a cop-out. I was scared of being branded racist, so I looked the other way whilst this girl was gang raped. No. Not at all. Maggie Oliver in that is wrong. Charlie on that is wrong. And they're both wrong because neither of them have looked at the political interconnections within what is taking place here. I'll play a second video for you. Just bear with me.
Yes, it's time now for the big question. Tonight we're following up that stunning and devastating GB News investigation into the grooming gangs scandal, which saw thousands of vulnerable young women exploited, sexually assaulted and abused by gangs across the country. So, have the lessons of these appalling crimes been learned? To discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome Charlie Peters, who made the film for GB News, and former Greater Manchester Police Detective and grooming gangs whistleblower Maggie Oliver. A privilege to have both of you on the show. Charlie, can I start with you, congratulate you on an important film. Why did you make it?
I made this film because we've never had a national conversation about this issue. When the lid blew off this scandal a decade ago, our response was very mealy-mouthed. We dealt with it full of political correctness, I felt, and I was rather stunned, 10 years on, that survivors were not being heard. The responses that we needed to see from government, police, the media, the law, social services, everyone, I felt was lacking. I thought the only way to really turn this around was to try again with some fresh thinking, some fresh analysis, and to ensure people knew that this crisis is still going on today.
Absolutely. I'll come to Maggie in just a moment. I think you've got some key statistics about the scale of these crimes and the fact that they are ongoing.
Well, in a GB News exclusive tonight, we've taken from the Maggie Oliver Foundation their most recent review of the vital and necessary work they are doing. The average age for the start of abuse that of survivors they encounter is just 12 years old. We've also found...
That's not the starting age, that's the average age.
Yeah.
Shocking.
And we've also found that there are currently more than 50 live or ongoing cases that the Maggie Oliver Foundation is supporting. I have to stress, this is just one charity covering the national picture. The real figure is likely much higher. We also found that the Maggie Oliver Foundation is dealing with more than 500 survivors being supported in last year alone. And finally, since 2020, more than 1,000 survivors of child sexual abuse and exploitation have come to the Foundation for support since 2020. Now, these are extraordinary figures, and clearly it shows the lessons of the past have not been learned, and survivors are still seeking support, from legal support to emotional support, and I think we're very, very lucky to have someone like Maggie joining us to deal with this today.
Well, we are, and Maggie, I'm humbled to have you on the show. You've been such an important voice for the victims and helping them pursue justice and lock up the evil criminals that committed these crimes. Maggie, those figures we've just heard, that's the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? We'll never have a full sense of the scale of what's happened.
We won't, Mark, but every one of those numbers is a life destroyed. I think Charlie's done an amazing job, actually, Charlie, with that documentary. I think you've pulled together.
Every one of those numbers is a life destroyed. Direct quote from Maggie Oliver. Every one of those numbers is a life destroyed. Remember what your council leader, Amanda Chadderton, had to say. Do you remember when she blocked the grooming gang inquiry? When a white woman, mother of a child, blocked the grooming gang inquiry for a second time. Do you remember what she said? Can't say. It's destroyed lives. Yet here we have Maggie Oliver clearly contradicting what your council leader said. Will you remember that in May?
Gather a lot of the information that was needed. I set up the Maggie Oliver Foundation about 3 years ago because the authorities were not and still are not dealing with this crime properly. They were not gathering the statistics, they weren't gathering the information. I have now gathered a really good team around me. We've built our own system and we are collecting the evidence that the government and the politicians don't want people to know. And, you know, Charlie's referred to the fact that racism has been linked to this kind of crime. But for me, this is about child protection. And if we don't face this head on, the losers in every case is child or a young woman who has their whole life destroyed. And, you know, 50%, 55% of the cases on our system since 2020 have got an element of sexual exploitation to them. And the victims who come to us only come to us because they have been failed and are being dismissed by the police and the authorities when they go to them in desperation for help. Many of them are being criminalised. They are being blamed still for their own abuse and pushed away. And I am not blaming individual police officers. There are good and bad in every profession. And yes, there are some poor police officers, but there are some very good ones. But the solution to ending this horrendous abuse has to come from the top. And by the top, I mean the government and chief constables and those in positions of authority. They know what is going on. It is a very time-consuming, expensive and resource-intensive investigation to prosecute these gangs, because they are now so sophisticated, they are so experienced in picking out vulnerability in their victims, and those victims who are selected find themselves lacking, and even when they go to the police, there is very little appetite to investigate these crimes. They are not protected efficiently, and the gangs use increasingly sophisticated means of threatening these children. You know, on Snapchat and on messaging, they take photographs of them because, as Charlie's highlighted, you know, it still is they befriend them, they become a boyfriend, they think they're in a relationship. Often one of these children will send photographs to their abuser. That photograph then becomes a means of threatening and blackmailing and frightening those children. Because, you know, we had a case recently of a little girl of 11 who had sent photographs to her boyfriend. He then threatened to send them to her parents. Her father contacted the police. Police officers turned up into their home address, walked straight up to this little girl who was mortified and basically said to her, look, do you know that you have committed criminal offences by sending those photographs on your phone? But if you don't say anything more about it, delete your messages, delete your computer, we won't do anything else about it. And the father rightly came to the foundation in absolute disgust, because behind that man threatening that girl is another gang, and there will be many, many other victims. And the police need to act when they are faced with information like that, and far too often they don't. And I would like to just say, Mark, that if there are any victims or survivors listening now who feel that they are on their own throughout the whole country, we are a small national charity. Come to us and we will help you be heard. And we have had success. Obviously, I resigned about Rochdale, but I work.
I just wanted to stop that there for a second. I will let you hear the end of that because I think it's powerful and it should be heard. Charlie Peters made reference to a series of statistics. What I found disappointing was that the analysis was not presented in any, broken down through any demographic profiling. I would want to have known the demographic backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, class backgrounds of the victims, and who they claimed had been the perpetrators. The victims would have known. Yet I'm not sure why that data was kept from us. And both Maggie and Charlie made reference to the importance of data. Yet in those headlines, the data wasn't there. It's not a criticism. I'm just trying to understand why it isn't there. What's also clear is the question at the outset was, have lessons been learnt? It's clear from the data and from Maggie Oliver's own response that one, the lessons of the past not only have not been learnt, these crimes are ongoing now, and the way in which these crimes are being committed have evolved. I think that's the takeaway from what we've heard so far. I'll carry on.
On Augusta, and we have recently supported, I think it's 7 victims in Hull, where Hull police had closed down that investigation, saying there was insufficient evidence to do anything. We supported them, advocated for them, and almost a year and a half later, that case has now been reopened. So things can be done. but it shouldn't need an organisation like us to fight for them. It just fills me with horror, Mark, still. It's taken over my life, but I'm not on my own now. I have a wonderful team at the foundation, and we are doing some amazing work in helping these young women put their lives back together. We listen to them. We don't judge them. We communicate. We treat them with empathy, with kindness. And it isn't always about a prosecution, because as a former police officer, I know it is impossible to prosecute every man who rapes a child. If the evidence isn't there, it doesn't go to court. But the way that woman or young man is treated by the system will impact on their life for the rest of their life. But with the right care and the right treatment and the right conversations, that victim can recover, and we are helping them to recover.
Indeed, I'll ask producer Stephen to give me the details of your organisation, your foundation, before we conclude this conversation. Charlie, was this a case, in terms of the police and local authorities, was it a case of cover-up, was it incompetence or denial?
Well, we still don't know the full picture. No, we went to several towns as we conducted this year-long investigation. But through our reporting and investigation across the country, we found up to 50 different towns and cities, as shown by a map during the documentary, where there have been credible allegations of grooming gangs. Now, in several of those towns, it's clear that cover-ups did happen. But a lot of the time, it was ignorance and incompetence that also ruled the way. As Maggie has pointed out, oftentimes there are good police officers and there are bad police officers, but they're also just people who aren't capable of doing their job, and they need additional support, they need training, and they need guidance. The reason why the national response to this crisis is so absolutely vital is because we need new powers to give to the good police officers so they can carry out the appropriate job. And we also need to empower those in local authorities to have mandatory reporting, so that when people hear about cases of CSA or
I disagree. I disagree with the incompetence line. And I've been at this for a long time now. I disagree with the incompetence line. Prejudice, absolutely. The prejudice towards white working class girls. You call it, there's a name for it, but we tend to use it in a race relations word towards ethnic minorities. We call it unconscious bias. You've heard the term, unconscious bias. You've also heard the term institutional racism, following the Stephen Lawrence inquiry by Lord Macpherson, where it's clear that the institutional racism in an organisation prevented them from taking it seriously. So those two factors, whilst we're happy to apply them when ethnic minorities are the victims, we seem reluctant to use those phrases, and Charlie would know those phrases. And Maggie Oliver most definitely does. It's institutional racism and unconscious bias, unless you're going to tell me that those two conditions only exist in one ethnic direction. Secondly, for those of you who are asking, I'm looking at some of the comments come up, if you want Maggie Oliver and Charlie Peters to come to Oldham. It's not whether Charlie will come to Oldham or not, but Maggie Oliver, and I'm not criticising Maggie Oliver, she has been walking a tightrope because she needs to maintain relationships with the politicians and the police officers. I don't. Maggie Oliver could have spoken out about the political dimension of what's took place in Oldham. She's in Rochdale, for God's sake, next door. Many of the young women are from our town. That's her on her books. She's refrained from doing so. I don't blame her, because her focus is in supporting the victims. I understand the tightrope she's walking. I understand what her priority is. My priority, as I've maintained from the beginning, is putting a stop to this. And to put a stop to this, we've got to address the political dimension. which once again, so there's no ambiguity, is the Labour Party dependence on the bloc Muslim vote. And the comments about the mainstream media and why the mainstream media doesn't. Again, it goes to institutional racism. We have, and as uncomfortable as it is to many of us, the rationale for race quotas, ethnic quotas, is that an organisation needs to better represent, needs a wider demographic representation so it can represent the communities it serves. In essence, that's what race quotas are about. Whether you agree with them or disagree with them is put that to one side for now. But the rationale for race quotas is that an organisation needs to reflect the communities it serves. The problem is, white working class is not visible, is it? It's visible to look at black, it's visible to look at Asian, it's visible to look at Muslim or Sikh with the religious hairdress. It's visible to look at gender between men and women, but class is invisible to look at. And the mainstream media is full of what I've maintained from the outset and described as a fake liberal metropolitan elite who look down with contempt upon the white working classes. And I've maintained that right from the outset. Let's carry on.
They are required to report it, because all too often, as we found in many of these historic cases, many of these most shocking scandals, people heard about abuse, did not pass it on. They did not take actions. Indeed, GB News Investigates has uncovered several instances in the last 2 months where people who failed in that most vital duty are still working in the public sector today. So that is absolutely vital. Accountability must also be delivered. So if you do fail so extremely at this level in the government or in the police or in law, you should not continue that role. You should not work in the public sector again.
I agree. Don't you, Jim? Don't you, Debbie Abrams? Don't you, Amanda Chatterton? Don't you, Sean Fielding? Don't you, Abdul Jabbar? Don't you, Arood Shah? Dr. Chauhan? Shahid Mushtaq? Peter Dean, Fida Hussein? Jenny Harrison? Barbara Brownridge? I could continue. But more specifically, Jim McMahon, whilst leader of Oldham Council, was complicit in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of working-class white girls on multiple occasions. One via the email chain that you saw, that I was going to get arrested and put in prison for releasing. I didn't leak that, I released it with my name and my photograph next to it. My life has been hell ever since. He also was in charge of the council that failed to cooperate with the Home Affairs Select Committee. The Burnham Assurance Review makes reference to multiple occasions where his samosa nibbling paw prints are all over information that should have been released into the public domain but was somehow withheld. And of course we go to his actions to this day, where he's now running. The MP for Oldham West and Royton is in hiding. He is in hiding because he is complicit in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of the town's children. Or do people think I am being unfair with that? Does anyone believe that a statement making reference to the Rotherham abuse is somehow sufficient to have warned the members of the town, families in this town, parents in this town, that the grooming gangs were openly dragging children off the streets of our town centre in broad daylight and gang raping them. Because that's what the report showed and confirmed.
In many ways, you should be ostracised for this gross failure. But unfortunately, as we found, that is often not the case.
Finally, Maggie, can I ask you a simple question? Has justice been done?
Not until every one of these abusers is in prison. And what I would like to say, Mark, before I finish, is a very quick point, that we are trying to build relationships with police forces. We are actually the best friend of the police, because...
There you go. She confirms she's the best friend of the police. But again, for me, and this is where we... It's okay to come to a place from a, to come to a challenge from a different place and to have different elements to how you deal with it. She wants the abusers put in prison. I don't want to stop at the abusers. I want those who held civic roles, key decision-making positions, who knew, and in Oldham, for the sake of community relations, remember, was their excuse. They kept it from the public, they kept it from you, they kept it from me, and they kept it hidden so that our children could continue to be groomed and gang raped. And if anyone said anything in this town, it was a far-right conspiracy. I agree with you, Gary. I want the authorities in prison. I want those responsible in prison. I want Gerard Jones, the smirking Gerard Jones, who's exposed, the Director of Children's Services from Oldham Council, exposed for his role in blocking victims from giving testimony, put in prison. The former Chief Executive, Dr. Carolyn Wilkins, and the entire senior team have run away. I want them hauled back in. And this is why we needed a public inquiry. And this is why we still need a public inquiry. And if demanding a public inquiry, and let's take this to an alternative ending. If McMahon has nothing to hide, if he did nothing wrong, then why is he not supporting a public inquiry? If Debbie Abrahams has nothing to hide and did nothing wrong, why is she not supporting a public inquiry? If Amanda Chadderton and Abdul Jabbar have nothing to hide, why did they vote to block a public inquiry? I hear talk, and Oldham I speaks to him more than I do. I've had a couple of conversations with Charlie Peters. They won't talk to me. They won't interview me. They are not... Where I take it to isn't where they want to politically take it. They are comfortable in that space around political correctness and trying not to offend minorities. Because actually, and I'll be honest with you, it takes you to a very race-focused conclusion. And as I've explained many a time, there are plenty of people from my own community, and demographically my community, Muslims, Asians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, who find what's took place abhorrent. But we have been powerless to stop it, and we've been powerless to stop it because those responsible have had the fast track to the most powerful politicians and police officers in the town. And as a comparison, so it's not the same, as a comparison, one only has to look at how Greater Manchester Police have been complicit in covering up the firebombing of Aruj Shah's car. Once it did not achieve its desired outcome, from Jim McMahon's point of view, which was my arrest, because he tried to claim I had incited it. Once the video came out, Greater Manchester Police have sat on that for nearly 2 years now. Why? It shows the corruptness that runs rife through our civic institutions, through our town. And this corruptness, clear corruptness, is exactly the same in towns and cities across the country that face similar challenges. For those of you joining me late, my name is Raja MBE. This is a Recusant 9 transmission. The date is Sunday the 12th of February. We are discussing the GB News documentary by Charlie Peters. A brave piece of journalism. And he wants a national debate. I don't want a national debate. I want a national inquiry. Of the sort, of the type that has not been seen in this country in generations. Charlie makes reference to 50 towns and cities. I would want to draw all of those 50 towns and cities, see common patterns, and investigate. Because the other thing you've got to bear in mind is that these networks do not operate to single council boundaries. The county lines operations in the same as drug dealing. Children, in fact, there are confirmed reports of how children were smuggled from one local authority to another That's just a nonsense question, Lynn, that I'm not even going to bother responding to right now. Who do you think reported Shabir Ahmed and got him arrested, Lynn? Shabir Ahmed was arrested because his daughter refused to remain silent. And his daughter and his other daughter are now in protective custody with their names changed. His wife committed suicide in Alexander Park boating lake, where you and I can stand up and the water won't even go to our waist. Falling into this race blaming narrative of what they're doing in the mosques, why aren't the Muslim community shouting and screaming, takes you always to the wrong place. This is an arrangement between criminals in the Asian community and the Muslim communities. What do you think happens in those flats that they've rented for the night when they bring the white child in? Do you think 20 blokes, friends, just rock up, rape her and go home? There's a financial exchange. This is a human trafficking organisation, operation. It's modern day slavery, it's child rape, it's all of those things. This is organised crime. This is organised crime. And yes, there are underlying cultural factors at play in these communities. But again, in a liberal Western democracy such as ours, it is the role of government to intervene. It is the role of government to intervene. So questions like this, why don't the elders intervene? It's just bullshit. What do you want? An 80-year-old bloke with a beard who goes to the mosque 5 days a week to intervene against an organised crime gang. Okay. I'll leave it there for now. I think it was a good documentary in the whole, and at the very least, it keeps the conversation ticking on. And as Older Mai says, there are still people new coming to this. There are still people who believed it was it is a far-right conspiracy. And we know it's not. Now, what we need to make sure is that we don't fall into a racist trap. Why don't the elders intervene? What do you think will happen to them? And do you not think they've already intervened? And what happened to them? If you followed any of my writing and any of my themes, I talk about the cartels and their affiliations with the Labour Party, the block vote that they deliver, and the exchange that takes place. And if you think it goes anywhere else, then tell me. Show me. If I've got it wrong, I'll hold my hands up and say I've got it wrong. And I can't remember what name to use, when Sophie, in the report, Sophie was taken to that house on attack close, and the guy disappeared afterwards. I'd spoken to her husband, the gentleman who's now committed suicide. Remember? I classed him as a friend. When Charlotte Green tried to claim I made it up, and I put up all of the text message exchanges I'd had with him for months, helping him build his case up, that led to him finally having a breakthrough with his wife that he'd failed to have for over 10 years. The attack close case is really interesting. The neighbours had reported it to the police. They were deeply uncomfortable of what was taking place in that house, and they'd reported it to the police. That's what had took place. The police had failed to intervene. Now, who do you believe? Do you believe the Asian neighbours who told the gentleman, we've reported this to the police, we're deeply concerned, and the police did nothing? Or do you believe the police? Imagine being a gangster and knowing that the police won't touch you, the towns of authority support you, and the media look away because they are told to. That's exactly what is taking place in our town. That is exactly what is taking place in our town. And sorry, I'm not being, and it's not my intention to be rude or dismissive of any of you. Either you or either Lynn or anyone else. We've come on a long, long journey together. And the obvious places you take this to, sometimes, it's not racism, it's ignorance. What makes you think in my community, the elders have any more say than in your community? What makes you think that? What makes you think that the criminals, the organised crime, kingpins, are not as scary in my community as they are in yours? Particularly in my community, where they rub shoulders openly with senior politicians and police officers. Thank you, Julie. So that, yeah. Then the neighbours were threatened afterwards for speaking out. Okay, let's carry on. And to bring something up, read it and carry on. So this is Mark Wilkinson's, Councillor Mark Wilkinson, Failsworth West Councillor. It's an update he put up 4 days ago. I'm going to read it first and then I'm going to comment on it. I think, first of all, Mark was very, very brave, by the way, and very proactive in what he did. So I think that's important to make clear from the outset. On Monday, the 1st of February 2023, I wrote to Mr. Phil Quirk, head teacher at Failsworth Co-op Academy, likewise the trustees, the CEO of OMBC, Mr. Harry Caffrell, and Chief Superintendent Christopher Bowen of Oldham Police. I delivered a full report and expressed my concerns in relation to several complaints which had been made to me personally by anxious and worried parents with a view to the Academy implementing new safeguarding and guidelines to staff and students regarding antisocial and aggressive conduct. So Mark clearly had reports from other parents of their children being bullied and assaulted. That's what he's saying there. Unfortunately, Greater Manchester Police and the Chief Executive Officer at Oldham Council have not acknowledged my correspondence. So that is a councillor for Failsworth West who has not even had a response from the Chief Executive of Oldham Council. This is a democratically elected. You know, for our democracy to function, the people we elect are our voices. And they should be able to hold these institutions to account. Well, the police haven't bothered responding, and neither have the council's chief executive bothered responding. The school responded. However, the good news is, I had a 2-hour meeting with Mr. Quirk yesterday. I was allowed full access to the school from 8:15 a.m. when the students entered the building, plus morning assembly and various classrooms and the hub. I have to say, on reflection, what presented itself to me was very impressive. However, I am well aware that this was a fleeting visit and only a snapshot of life in a very busy local school. Each morning, as pupils arrive, they will be aware of members of staff positioned at the end of Brierley Avenue with the junction of Ashton Road East, which hopefully enables pupils to feel safe and secure around the perimeter of the building. I observed that the students made their way to lessons in a very orderly manner. Mr. Quirk has had a full revamp of all the toilet facilities. Staff now monitor each toilet at break and lunchtime. This is something I fully endorse following the reports I received. So I get the impression that a lot of what was taking place in and around the toilets. This is Hate Crime Awareness Week, and the head teacher arranged for two officers from Greater Manchester Police to attend today to carry out a presentation to pupils. The incident at Tesco has been dealt with by the school and GMP, and therefore under strict guidance I cannot divulge the outcome other than to say it has been resolved between all parties concerned. I'll stop there. And you can read the rest of it on his post if you want. It has been resolved between all parties concerned. Reading between the lines, code to me means no one's been charged. No one's been prosecuted. And the parents of the victims were convinced to drop it. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but that's what I'm reading from that. What I'll also say about Failsworth Academy is that its governance arrangements are in no way fit for purpose. There is No community representation on the board of governors. All the other schools have like a councillor on board or an option for that. It's got 2 parent governors who are clearly limited in their skills and abilities to influence or impact on the governance structure. And nearly all the other positions are held by employees or associates of the Co-op Academy group. It's not transparent at all. And Mr. Quirk and the Academy know that. And I don't believe this will be the last you hear of that. So let's see. But well done to Mark. Well done to Mark to sticking his neck out, meeting with parents, concerned parents. Remember, these concerned parents would have raised their complaints to the school, to the council, to even the police before, and had been fogged off. Oldham Council has been receiving. Please, by the way, if you're finding value in this transmission, like, share, buy me a samosa, buy me a coffee. These transmissions are only possible with your support. I got very close to a minimum wage after the call out for support. I think some people committed who clearly couldn't afford to commit, so they dropped off. And other people dropped off because they didn't like that they couldn't influence me in what I wanted to raise and the perspectives I give. Because someone gives me £2 or £5 or £10 even, it doesn't give them a right to tell me what I should be talking about and shouldn't be talking about and what position I should take. The reason I've got as far as I've got, the reason we are where we are, is because I've been able to call the situation as I see it throughout. Right or wrong, I've been able to do what I think is right. And if I get it wrong, and there are times I have got it wrong, you'll also see I apologised or I held my hands up. And I am very much learning, the same as everyone else is. Please like, please share. There's 197 of you watching today. There's 197 on my screen. I'm going to just go and refill my drink. Not snort anything up my nose, as has been claimed. Refill my hot drink. And I'll come back in I'll come back in a minute or so. But whilst I'm away, if you are new to me, and if you don't subscribe, please consider buying me a coffee at the very least. Okay, we're on 60 likes. 204 of you watching. And yeah. Yeah, since the transmission started, 0 coffees. Nice to be appreciated. I was checking my phone whilst I was gone, Julie. And well, nature knows, but a friend of mine, I helped him come up with something called uncoached gin. And bear in mind, I'm not a drinker. Anyway, he's just messaged me to say Will Ferrell's just bought a couple of bottles. I'm in the wrong job. I should just, yeah. Never mind. Okay. Let's carry on. Oldham Council released this press release. Poverty proofing schemes launch in Oldham schools. 7th of February 2023. A new poverty proofing, inverted commas by the way, poverty proofing scheme is being launched in schools across Oldham this week in a bid to help families struggling in the face of the cost of living crisis. Teams from the charity Children North East will be visiting an initial 10 schools in the borough, speaking to children and young people to help identify the barriers families living in poverty are experiencing every day. These idiots have hired an organisation from the Northeast, Children Northeast, to visit an initial 10 schools to speak to children to identify the barriers families living in poverty are experiencing every day. Topics of discussion will include issues such as how free school meals are delivered, uniforms are bought, the process around non-uniform days, present buying for teachers, the cost of after-school clubs, and funding for school trips, and much more. Children North East will then use insight from their visits and unique methodology to train local staff. This will apparently help school to address inequalities, reduce the stigma around poverty, and help find ways to break the link between educational attainment and financial background. And yes, in the background, Ian, the council have repeatedly put up the cost of school meals. Council, sorry, I'm laughing because I don't know what else to do. Councillor Amanda Chadderton visited Beaver Primary School in Colders last week to find out more about how staff and students are dealing with the ongoing cost of living crisis. The school, which is seeing firsthand how hard families are struggling, is helping in practical ways, such as by giving out coats to students that need them. So why don't you just buy some bloody coats then, Amanda Chadderton, with the money? Councillor Chadderton said, "We know that sadly children and young people are being affected by the financial challenges their families are facing, and that children who grow up in poverty can see a significant detrimental impact on both their current well-being and their future life prospects. Poverty pimping. Here we go. The experts in poverty pimping. The Labour Party, Oldham's Labour Party experts in poverty pimping. Figures from the Office for National Statistics show that adults who lived in poverty as children have significantly greater than average chances of lower educational outcomes, earning lower wages and being unemployed. Well, then you already know then, don't you? So what are you funding this lot for? Remember when Jim McMahon was the leader of Oldham Council, he brought in Estelle Morris and spent £1 million on that he used. It was just a game for him as a stepping stone to become an MP. He created £1 million sort of trust fund or something that the council was going to spend every year, and a report. Nah, nothing. That's 10 years ago. Weren't you in charge of education at the time, Amanda Chadderton? You were, weren't you? When the Estelle Morris report came out, you were in charge of Oldham Council's education portfolio at the time. What happened to that £1 million and the £1 million that were promised every year since then, Amanda Chadderton? That's why we're working with Children North East to enable schools to have a much more complex picture of the needs of their children. So they brought in an external organisation from the North East to conduct some focus groups with children about free school meals and whatnot, to which then they'll produce a report and train the school staff to have a much more complex picture of the needs of children and give them new insight, people, into how we can all work together to tackle the problems we face. Wow. Next paragraph, ready? This work is just one part of Oldham Council's £3 million we can help support campaign. How much are they paying them? How much are they paying them? Lorna Nichol, poverty-proofing the school day team manager at Children North East, is delivering the first round of training in Oldham schools. She said, our poverty-proofing, is that bracket C to mean copyright? Are they trying to copyright the term poverty-proofing? Our poverty-proofing work enables us to get a complex overview of a school. What on earth does that mean? If the head teachers of a school don't have a complex overview of their own school, if the governors, the trustees don't have a complex overview of their own school, then they're in the wrong bloody jobs. We do consultations with students, parents, staff and governors to understand the challenges they face in an inclusive, straightforward and supportive process. Well, the words inclusive, straightforward and supportive, if that's what innovative means, and groundbreaking and whatever terms, we then work with a school's leadership team to identify ways to reduce the impact of poverty on students. Well, she's already confirmed what they want to do, haven't they? Look, they've already confirmed what this is about. Free school meals are delivered. Okay, free school meals for all. Or how about the council stop increasing the cost of school meals for those who are forced to pay for them? How uniforms are bought. Okay, how about the council do something about that with the £3 million? The process around non-uniform days, well, I'm sorry, children enjoy wearing their own clothes as well. Present buying for teachers. The cost of after-school clubs or most of the secondary... Oh my God. Let's type in children northeast, and I haven't typed it in yet, so I have no idea who they are. This is your money, £3 million. So children northeast are unashamedly from the northeast, as you can see. Poverty proofing. A nationally recognised tool supporting schools to remove barriers for students living in poverty. Well, you've already said what the barriers are, so remove them and it's straightforward. It's a joke, isn't it? It's a complete joke. Our researchers will conduct consultations with students, parents, staff and governors to understand the challenges they face in an inclusive, straightforward and supportive process. So the project whatever, all she did was quote her webpage. You've got this right, haven't you? Yeah. Our team. Okay. Remember, we've said they've come down to Oldham, a multicultural, multiracial town. We agree? Yeah. The entire board of trustees are white. The entire senior team is white. I'm the racist, remember? I'm the racist. This is a joke. This is what Amanda Chariton is doing with your money. This is what the leader of Oldham Council, Amanda Chariton, is not only doing with your money. She's whatever it is she is, that her and her council are putting it out on a press release. It's a gravy train, isn't it? It's a gravy train. And also, I and all of my friends grew up in poverty. I and every one of my friends grew up in poverty. We knew education was a leveller and we made it through. And we made it through, in part, because we wanted a better life for ourselves and our families, irrespective of the adversity we face. Life isn't fair. And we need to teach our children that life isn't fair, and we all have adversity at some point in our lives. And because of who we are and where we come from and what we look like, it's not always a level playing field. And we've got to prepare our children to deal with that. It's called resilience. Not creating a dependency culture. But Amanda Chariton and the fake liberal metropolitan elite and all of those in the council are dependent on keeping us poor and our people poor. Because it keeps them wealthy. It keeps them in jobs. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Okay, moving on. On Thursday morning, I think it was about 7:30 Thursday morning, I was just making a pot of coffee. I was actually went to waste. Good pot of coffee went to waste. 5 very young police officers politely knocked on my door. All of them were nervous. They'd come to arrest me. I'd invited them in because my kettle was overboiling. They arrested me. The young man who did most of the talking, I was looking at him and trying to work out, I think I know his mother or his father, if I haven't been to his christening when he was a baby. I was very embarrassed. They'd been sent from Oldham police station to arrest me. I live in Tameside. It's not usual for one police station to send police officers round to another area to arrest you. And the police officers didn't know which station they were taking me to. They were kids. I don't mean it disrespectfully, but they're young. But 5 of them, nonetheless. Thank you for my first samosas of the night. So 5 police officers came and arrested me. And they make reference to malicious communication and harassment. They wouldn't tell me what I'd done here, whilst I was in my house. It's a bit of toing and throwing, but they took my phone and they took my computer. And off they took me to Tameside police station in the end. At Tameside police station, the young lady, the young officer who read me my rights, very, very nervous young woman. Add wages, she's never arrested anyone before in her life. Went up to the custody sergeant and claimed I'd incited rape. To which I was immediately outraged, and the other police officer, to give me due, said, "It's all right, mate. It's just an allegation." The custody sergeant asked the young officer some questions. She couldn't really answer them properly as to why 5 police officers had come to arrest me. I heard the mumbling of something about threat to life. Yeah. Threat to life, apparently. Dressed me in their special clothes and threw me in a cell for a couple of hours. I gave him the name of my solicitor, so they were calling him, and the name of a friend of mine who I was meant to see later in that morning. But they never called him. In the cell, I'm sat there. A couple of hours later, cell opens. And to all extents and purposes, a very decent police officer comes in who knows me from past. I won't say his name because I don't think it's fair right now. We have a conversation. He gets me a brew. He's very clear. He's come down because the calls come through that I've been arrested. He's come from Oldham police station, dropped everything, come from Oldham police station. He'll do the interviewing and he'll make sure that I leave with my phone and my laptop. That Oldham police station had arrested me, and there was no arresting sort of interviewing officer from CID properly there. Means my interpretation of that is that my arrest was authorised from Chris Bowen. Chief Superintendent Chris Bowen authorised my arrest. There will be a reckoning, Chief Superintendent. You are not above the law. You might run away with your pension, but you're not above the law. As police officers across the country are finding out, none of you are above the law. I get interviewed. Now, I can't go into, I have bail conditions, so I can't go into things specifically, but I can talk around the issue. I get interviewed. The allegations against me are preposterous. And what I said is clearly not what has been claimed. I said. And throughout all of this, I've maintained that we'll win this at the ballot box. Have I not? I enjoyed the interview. I think the police officer enjoyed the interview. In fact, he told me he enjoyed the interview. But it was a politically motivated arrest, and it's not on him, and it's not on the kids that arrested me. I've got them on my Ring doorbell and stuff. Someone said, oh, you could play it. I won't do that. I won't embarrass them. It's not their fault. They were young, they were respectful, they were nervous. And I think it was cowardly that Chief Superintendent Chris Bowen sent a bunch of kids to arrest me. No, it's not a Robert Barnes scenario at all. No. So I'm just reading Pauline's comment. I'd written something, Pauline. I'm now on bail for 3 months. Pre-charge bail, without charge, pending further inquiries. Malicious communication and harassment. We'll see, won't we? I think you all know me by now, and I know what's going on well enough by now to know what's going on. And to my friends at Greater Manchester Police, you're not going to win this. This is a democracy. There is a rule of law. And I have every right to stand up for myself. And the context of this is, doesn't matter that I didn't say it. Or anything that they suggest. You've all seen what these people have done to me over the last 4 years, and yet the police have been complicit in covering it up. That's exactly what Chief Superintendent Chris Bowen and his hierarchy at Greater Manchester Police are. They're a bunch of cowards. There was only one outcome. I'm looking at the police officer at the end of the interview. I'm looking at my solicitor. Both decent lads. My solicitor had dropped everything to come to the police station to make sure I was all right. And the police officer whose case it wasn't had picked it up to make sure that it was done, handled in the right and proper way. And I did leave with my phone and my computer. In fact, I even got a lift home. But it was only going to end in one place. And whilst he was speaking to me, interviewing me, and whilst I was in the cell for 4 or 5 hours, which is why, dressed in the clothes they provided me, I went and stood under the Annie Kenny statue in Oldham Town Centre and announced my candidacy for MP for Oldham Western Royton. We will win this. We will not wear the uniforms of others. I'm not interested in Reform, the Conservatives or anyone else. We will win this as Oldhamers, and I will stand as an independent against James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon. And once I am elected as MP, I will force a reckoning against this council and against the corrupt Greater Manchester Police and the complicit mainstream media. It is as simple as that. It does not matter that McMahon enjoys a 10,000 plus block Muslim vote. It does not matter that he has 25,000 people voting for him. And the closest opposition was a Conservative from London who'd never been here before and has never been here again, who got 13,000 votes. I will mobilise every resource in every community in this town that has ever supported me, that I have ever supported and made a difference to. This is my town, these are my people. In every community. And we will chase James Ignatius Oruk McMahon and his corrupt Pakistani rape gang protecting Labour Party out of this town. And to get to where we need to get to. To get to where we need to get to. In the lead up to May's local elections, where councillors are selected, I am calling all the independent councillors and independent parties. Not interested in the racist ones, by the way, and you know who you are, so don't even pretend you're not. I'm calling on the Failsworth Independents, the Royton Independents, the Coldest Independents, the Saddleworth Independents, the Oldham Metropolitan lot. Everyone who cares about this town and the people within it, Markins and the Saw and Crompton team. I will convene a gathering of all independents over the next month. I ask all of you to attend. I will chair that meeting and we will leave with a shared covenant, with a series of sacred pledges to the people of our town so we can restore democracy and the rule of law within it. I have had disagreements with some of you. We've gone round the houses with others. All past transgressions are forgiven. We must work together. And I will be contacting you over the days and weeks to come. If you care about our communities in the same way I care about our communities, then you will attend and you'll work with everyone else there to create a better future for all of us who live and breathe this town and the people who live within it. And if you don't, well then we know, don't we? Then we know. My name is Raj Amir, and I am the candidate, the independent candidate for the Royton, or Oldham West and Royton constituency. Very good evening.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.